Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. Welcome to the fourth meeting for the Newton Corner Long-Term Planning Study. My name is Patrick Snyder, and I'm the MassDOT project manager for this effort. I'd like to start with thanking you all for being here today, including any elected officials or members of their staff in attendance. I'd also like to thank you for your patience as MassDOT has continued the alternatives development process. This is a critical area in Newton and for the regional transportation network. It's taken some extra time to make sure that what we're presenting today aligns with feedback we've received and the overall goals for this study. With that, we have some procedural slides, and then we'll review the agenda and get into today's presentation. As we get started, we'd like to review some Zoom procedures just to make sure everyone is on the same page with our technology. We will have the opportunity for discussion with questions and comments later in the presentation. If you'd like to share questions or comments during the presentation, you can use the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the Q&A icon. That'll bring up a box you can type throughout. You can use the buttons on the bottom left of your screen to edit your audio and video options. You'll have the opportunity to speak verbally later in the meeting. At that time, you can click the raised hand button, or you can do Alt-Y on the keyboard. If you're on the phone, you can dial *9, which will raise your virtual hand. We'll see it on the screen and call out your name, or if you're on the phone, we'll call out the last 4 digits of your phone number. If you're unable to access the internet or have technical problems today, you can call in on the phone at 1-646-876-9923. Enter the webinar ID 897-6153-4743 and enter the passcode 74979. I'm going to start over with that passcode, 947989. Those numbers are in the email that you received when you registered for this Zoom meeting. If you're watching today's meeting on a computer, you can use the view button at the top of your screen to adjust your view settings for gallery, speaker, etc. Closed captioning is available. It's automatically generated by Zoom, and you can activate it by clicking on the CC closed caption button at the bottom of your screen. If you have trouble with the meeting technology during today's presentation, you can call 1-888-799-9666, which will connect you to Zoom technical support. We'd also like to review some meeting procedures. Today's meeting is open to members of the public and will be recorded, so it's considered part of the public record. All parts of this meeting are public record, and by continuing attendance with this meeting, you're consenting to be part of the record. If you're not comfortable with that, that's okay. You can excuse yourself from the meeting or remain on mute with your video off. This meeting will be recorded and posted at a later date if you do choose to excuse yourself. We do welcome all questions and comments, but we request that you refrain from any disrespectful ones. A quick review of today's agenda. We're going to proceed with an overview of the study, review the alternatives development process, and then present draft alternatives that were developed based on feedback at previous meetings. We'll then also introduce the evaluation criteria, which will be used as part of the next step during the study, alternatives analysis, as we continue to refine alternatives. We'll close with an overview of schedule and next steps, and then we'll open the floor to feedback, first from the working group, and then from the public. Today's meeting is a working group meeting. As part of the study process, MassDOT assembled an advisory working group. The role of this group is to provide local knowledge, perspective, and expertise, share information with communities and organizations that you represent, review information, and give feedback. The working group is a companion to the public engagement also being carried out during the study, and we have periodic public engagement meetings. We previously established ground rules for these meetings and would like to review them so that we're on the same page. We ask you to remain respectful in all dialogues throughout the study process. We are all interested in the same goal of achieving meaningful improvements to Newton Corner. You're welcome to attend all our meetings. If you can't make it, please send an email and let me know if you'd like another person to attend on your behalf. I can send them a Zoom link. Please keep the distractions during the meeting to a minimum. by muting your audio when you're not speaking and keeping your devices on silent. For all these meetings, you're welcome to keep your video on or off. If the video or audio become distracting, meeting staff may turn either off just to keep things quiet, flowing easily. Finally, a reminder, again, that all these meetings will be recorded and posted on the study website. At this point, we'd like to take a couple slides to provide an overview of the study. Understanding it's been a while since our last meetings, we'd like to refresh on the goals of the study and where today's meeting fits in the overall process. MassDOT is carrying out the study to look at long-term transformational changes to the Newton Corner I-90 exit 127 interchange area. It's a planning study, so everything we present is conceptual and for feedback. The goals on this slide provide a framework for the study process and how we considered putting these alternatives together. We developed them early in the study, alongside feedback from the working group and members of the public. Our goals for the study are improve access, safety, and mobility for all, reconnect Newton's neighborhoods, enhance quality of life, promote sustainable transportation solutions, and develop actionable recommendations. These goals have also been further fleshed out into objectives for specificity. The full documentation of the goals and objectives can be found on the study website. In terms of the overall study process and where today's meeting fits in, we're currently in the middle of it during alternatives development. Our initial study meetings and tasks focused on setting goals, objectives, and evaluation criteria, and establishing existing conditions. Since this is a long-term planning study, we also talked about future conditions, transportation and traffic, but also development, land use, and environmental, to set a baseline for these concepts. Part of those discussions included issues and opportunities, a look at constraints, and the array of possible improvements to the area. Currently, we're in the alternatives development process. At our last working group meeting and our last public meeting, we presented different components for feedback, potential elements that could be incorporated into distinct alternatives. That's why we're here today. Since those meetings, we've taken that feedback and used it to develop 6 distinct draft alternatives for discussion. This is part of our stakeholder engagement process and building consensus, which take place throughout the study. After today's meeting, we'll move to analyze the potential benefits and impacts for these alternatives prior to developing a draft implementation plan. We will continue to have opportunities for feedback at key points, which we will outline in the study schedule later in the presentation. At this point, we're going to transition to an overview of our alternatives development process, and I'm passing it to Christine from our consultant team, VHB.
Thank you, Patrick. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see a lot of familiar and friendly faces. I know it's been a while. I'm Christine Triarchis. As Patrick noted, I'm the project manager from VHB for this study. Now, let's take a look at the alternative development process. You may recall that we came to you last year with some initial ideas that we referred to as alternative components. These components were an initial list of ideas based on previous feedback that we'd received that could then be layered upon each other to develop full concepts. These included the following components on the screen. So I'll read through them very briefly. Number 1, 2-directional travel within Newton Corner. 2, installing roundabouts. 3, a new bridge connecting Center Street North to Center Street South. A relocated I-90 westbound on-ramp. 5A and B are a relocated I-90 eastbound off-ramp and extending the existing I-90 eastbound off-ramp. 6 is closing or repurposing the Washington Street westbound bridge. 7 was a bus transit hub in Newton Corner. 8 was a potential commuter rail station in Newton Corner. 9 was air rights or decking over I-90. Then closing or repurposing the Washington Street eastbound bridge. A pedestrian or bicycle bridge over I-90. A neighborhood greenway on Charles Bank Road. A shared use path on St. James Street. A pedestrian and bicycle bridge connecting directly to the Charles River. Full interstate access at West Newton, and finally new interstate access in Brighton. We then conducted what we called a first level screening, where we considered feedback from all of you in the working group, the City of Newton, public feedback, agency input, including from DCR, MBTA, and MassDOT, generally how well the component met the goals of the study, and if there were any fatal flaws. With this first level screening, we did screen some of these components out, including number 14, a direct pedestrian and bicycle path to the Charles River, and number 16, interstate access in Brighton. The I-90 eastbound off-ramp components of 5A and 5B are included in some of the concepts you'll see here today, but in a revised capacity than what we originally presented. Finally, while we haven't completely ruled out the option of using roundabouts, we did sketch out the footprints that would be needed at the intersections within the interchange. And to handle the expected traffic volumes, these roundabouts unfortunately would have to be quite large and would require a lot of space and result in significant right-of-way impacts, which is why you will not see any reflected in the current draft concepts. Now we're going to review the 6 draft alternative concepts with you to get your feedback before we carry them into the analysis phase. Before presenting each draft alternative, I want to set the stage that these are concept level alternatives and are preliminary. They are intended to illustrate intent rather than provide a detailed design. Further refinements will continue through alternatives analysis and in coordination with all of you in our working group, the City of Newton, MassDOT, and ongoing public engagement. These concepts are also available on the study website, which is linked below. If you'd prefer to open them up on your own computer and be able to zoom in and out as we go through, I will pause for a few seconds to give everyone a chance to open up the file if you so choose. When you get to the website, it is located under Study Documents and then Working Group Meeting number 4. All right. Now, my colleague Matt Duranlo, Patrick, and I will be alternating who is speaking to each alternative as we go through these. Alternative 1, neighborhood connections. This first combined alternative is focused on enhancing neighborhood connections for all users, including the addition of a pedestrian and bicycle bridge across I-90 with limited right-of-way impacts. This alternative will also maintain the existing vehicular bridges on the east and west side of the interchange. As you follow along, I'm going to highlight a few key features of this alternative. So the first is maintaining one-way travel on the western bridge, so it would be in the southbound direction. Next is extending the second lane on I-90 eastbound on the I-90 eastbound off-ramp by about 400 feet. Then, as I noted, a new pedestrian and bicycle bridge across I-90. Then extending the second lane on the I-90 westbound off-ramp by about 500 feet. I'll note that this is one element that you will see in all of the concepts presented today. This includes two-way travel, vehicular travel on Washington Street north of I-90, as well as on that east bridge. It includes neighborhood pedestrian and bicycle connections on both Charles Bank Road and St. James Street, connecting to the Charles River via Russell Road. And finally, a one-way northbound travel on St. James Street to accommodate a shared use path to accommodate both pedestrian and bicycle movements. Now I'm going to review the vehicular circulation patterns. So as shown, this alternative will provide two-way vehicular traffic on Washington Street north of I-90, as well as on the Eastern Bridge. One-way travel will be maintained on Washington Street south of I-90, as well as on the Western Bridge. The intent of this revised circulation pattern is to reduce some driver confusion by providing new and more direct travel paths. Additionally, as I noted, St. James Street will be converted to one-way travel northbound to accommodate the new shared use path. With the proposed changes in vehicle circulation, we wanted to show a few key travel path movements. The two that I'm going to walk through are routes that would change from the current operations. So for vehicles traveling on Washington Street from the west to I-90 westbound, drivers will now be able to stay on the north side of I-90 and won't need to circulate around the south side of Newton Corner to access the ramp. Another route that will be more direct is for vehicles traveling from Center Street north of I-90 from Watertown. to Park Street south of I-90. Drivers will now be able to travel southbound on the existing East Bridge, eliminating that need to travel all the way around Newton Corner. And now I'd like to highlight some of the active transportation features. So to orient everyone, I'm going to just walk through the legend briefly, at least on the first alternative. So the green line represents bicycle lanes. The pink lines represent a shared use path. The dashed brown lines represent sidewalks, and the solid yellow lines represent crosswalks. Bicycle accommodations will consist of a mix of shared use paths and dedicated bicycle lanes provided on nearly all roadways and through the Newton Corner interchange. A new bicycle and pedestrian bridge is proposed for north-south travel connecting on either side of I-90. Additionally, new shared use paths are proposed on St. James Street and on Charles Bank Road, connecting to the Charles River via a new connection off of Russell Road. Sidewalks will be provided along all roadways without shared use paths, and signalized crosswalks will be located in all quadrants of Newton Corner. I will now hand it over to Matt to walk through the second draft alternative.
Thank you, Christine. Good to see everybody again. My name is Matt Duranlo with VHB, and now I'm going to talk about alternative two. So the second draft combined alternative will improve north-south connectivity with a new center-to-center bridge, while also maintaining the existing east-west bridges at Newton Corner and the existing Church Street Bridge. The new center-to-center bridge will connect Center Street on the north and Center Street on the south, reestablishing the historic street network through Newton Corner, and it will provide two-way traffic for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists, greatly improving connectivity across Newton Corner. Now I'm going to talk through a few of the key features in this alternative, similar to how we did in alternative one. The first element I'm going to talk about is a relocated I-90 westbound on-ramp. So for this alternative, we're proposing to relocate that I-90 westbound on-ramp from where it's currently located, roughly in the northeast quadrant, to the west of Church Street, west of Newton Corner. Next element is a pedestrian and bicycle. Pedestrians and bicycles will be accommodated on the existing West Bridge with a new shared use path. Additionally, the West Bridge will accommodate northbound or westbound vehicular traffic. Similar to alternative one, the second lane on the I-90 eastbound off-ramp will be extended by about 400 feet, while that off-ramp will remain in the existing location. As I mentioned earlier, a key element of this alternative is that new center-to-center bridge, accommodating bidirectional travel for all users and reestablishing the historic street network. Also similar to alternative one, we'll propose two-way travel on Washington Street on the north side of Newton Corner to improve connectivity. And we also will propose two-way travel on Washington Street south on the south side of I-90 to improve connectivity on the south side. Also, as proposed in alternative one, that I-90 westbound off-ramp will be extended approximately 500 feet. The existing East Bridge, we are proposing to have a two-way transit way that will accommodate bidirectional bus traffic on the bridge and also will accommodate southbound or eastbound vehicular travel on the East Bridge. And finally, we'll have neighborhood pedestrian and bicycle connections connecting to the east. Looking at some vehicular circulation patterns, two-way traffic will be provided on Washington Street north and south of I-90 and on the new center-to-center bridge. Additionally, the two existing east and west bridges in Newton Corner will flip direction, with the west bridge carrying westbound or northbound traffic and the east bridge carrying eastbound or southbound traffic. This will better align with the direction of each bridge with the desired travel paths and will work in coordination with the new center-to-center bridge carrying bidirectional traffic. So looking at some key travel paths for movements that will change. First, I want to highlight the travel path from Park Street from the south for vehicles that would be heading to I-90 westbound at that relocated I-90 westbound on-ramp. So if you're coming up Park Street, you would now take a left onto Washington Street on the south side of I-90 on the new two-way section of Washington Street here. You would then continue across I-90 on the existing West Bridge, where traffic would be reversed, so it would be one way in the westbound, northbound direction. Then you would take a left onto Washington Street, past Church Street, and then take a left onto the new westbound on-ramp located west of Newton Corner. For drivers traveling from Center Street on the north side, from Watertown, traveling through to Center Street south towards Newton Center, you would be able to go straight through on this new bridge through the two new signalized intersections, and you would not need to circulate around Newton Corner as you do today. Looking at some active transportation features, first I'm going to talk about some bicycle accommodations, which will consist of a mix of shared use paths and bicycle lanes provided on nearly all roadways through Newton Corner. As I mentioned, that new center to center bridge will include bicycle accommodations, bike lanes in each direction. Additionally, the current West Bridge is proposed to include a shared use path, and the East Bridge is proposed to have bicycle lanes in each direction. Additionally, a shared use path is proposed on Charles Bank Road, similar to Alternative 1, which would connect to the Charles River via a new shared use path connection at the end of Russell Street, connecting to Nenantum Road. Sidewalks will be provided along all roadways that do not have shared use paths, and signalized crosswalks will again be located at signalized intersections and located in all four quadrants of Newton Corner. Now I'll pass it back to Christine to talk about Alternative 3.
Thank you, Matt. Alternative 3 builds upon Alternative 2 with a few additional elements. Specifically, this alternative includes a new MBTA commuter rail station and also includes enhanced ramps to and from I-90 West. To accommodate the reconstructed I-90 eastbound off-ramp and the I-90 westbound on-ramp, it is assumed that the Church Street Bridge will need to be widened and replaced to accommodate those widened ramps. Now I'll walk through the few additional key elements that are in addition to the Alternative 2. The first is an expanded two-lane I-90 eastbound off-ramp, which will be extended by approximately 1,200 feet. Next is a relocated I-90 westbound on-ramp. Then a new MBTA commuter rail station. And then finally, just to reiterate, all other components that are shown in this alternative are the same as what was shown in Alternative 2. Let's look at a couple travel paths for the movements that will change with this Alternative 3. The first path is from the I-90 eastbound off-ramp. If you're headed towards Center Street to the north, towards Watertown, as shown, you will now get off the ramp, take a left turn onto the new center-to-center bridge that will then allow you to travel northbound. For vehicles traveling from Center Street North, so from Watertown to the I-90 westbound on-ramp, drivers will now take a right onto Washington Street and then make a left turn at the relocated on-ramp that ties in at the intersection with the existing West Bridge. The active transportation features are the same as what was previously presented in Alternative 2. And I'm now going to hand it back to Matt to discuss Alternative 4.
Thanks, Christine. Before I get into Alternative 4, I just want to give a reminder that questions will be answered at the end of the presentation, but anytime you're also welcome to type in questions in the chat bar, and one of us will try and respond. And now getting into Alternative 4, this combined draft alternative, it was developed based on coordination with the MassDOT Highway Group to try and find ways to increase capacity on the ramp system and reduce spillback onto the main line while still promoting the study goals and objectives. This alternative will simplify circulation patterns and improve connectivity for all users with new bidirectional bridges across I-90 through Newton Corner, while also creating a direct connection from I-90 eastbound to Center Street northbound. Now, some key features of this alternative are going to include a new two-way Center Street to PBD Street bridge. So this is a new bridge that would roughly replace the existing West Bridge. It'd be located slightly closer to the East Bridge, roughly aligning with Center Street on the south side with approximately PBD Street on the north side. Alternative would also include a reconstructed and extended I-90 eastbound off-ramp. It would depart I-90 eastbound the main line in roughly the same location as Alternative 3. And then I'm going to talk about some features of this ramp on some upcoming slides. This alternative also includes a new MBTA commuter rail station in Newton Corner, two-way travel on Washington Street on both the north sides and south sides of I-90. The East Bridge would be reconstructed and would include two-way accommodations for vehicles, pedestrians, and bicyclists on the East Bridge. There'd be a new direct connection from I-90 eastbound that would connect to this East Bridge, allowing a more direct connection for vehicles destined to the north on Center Street towards Galen Street in Watertown, which again I'll highlight again in a minute on the travel path slide. Again, we'll extend that second lane on I-90 westbound to provide additional capacity. And we will include neighborhood pedestrian and bicycle connections connecting to the Charles River. So looking at the vehicle circulation patterns here, two-way travel will be provided on Washington Street north and south of I-90 and on both of the two new bridges connecting across I-90. So all of the local roads here will have two-way travel, providing enhanced connectivity. St. James Street in this alternative is proposed to have one-way travel heading away from Newton Corner in the eastbound or northbound direction to accommodate that shared use path. Now looking at a couple of key travel paths, I first want to highlight the I-90 eastbound to Center Street northbound travel path. So this would have the greatest change under this alternative. So you would depart I-90 onto the off-ramp, which would be extended farther back today by from roughly 1,200 feet. Then once you're on that off-ramp, the off-ramp would actually split into two separate ramps. Vehicles to the right would be most traffic, similar to today, where it would come up and intersect Center Street and Washington Street and that new Center to Peabody Bridge in roughly the same location as today. Drivers, though, destined to Center Street North towards Watertown would actually stay to the left at that split, and there'd be a new ramp that goes underneath the West Bridge and then comes up with a new signalized intersection on the East Bridge, allowing drivers to take a left there. So they would be able to avoid all the local streets on the south side of I-90 and take that left onto the East Bridge and then go north through the Washington Street intersection onto Center Street towards Watertown. And then the next travel path I want to talk about is vehicles from Park Street from the south to Washington Street from the west. So at the new two-way travel flow on the roadways, vehicles coming up Park Street would be able to take a left onto Washington Street on the south side of I-90, then take a right on that new West Bridge, and then take a left onto Washington Street. Under this alternative, left turns would be prohibited at certain intersections, such as that intersection in that northwest quadrant for northbound vehicles, in order to minimize travel conflicts and to better assign vehicles through Newton Corner. And then finally, looking at the active transportation features, here looking at bicycle accommodations. This alternative is primarily consisting of bi-directional bicycle lanes on all local roadways through Newton Corner. A proposed shared use path would be located on St. James Street. Similarly, this would connect through to the Charles River to provide that connection for bicyclists heading to the river. And then sidewalks, again, they'll be provided along both sides of all roadways that do not have a shared use path. And signalized crosswalks would be located at all the signalized intersections in each corner of Newton Corner. And with that, I'll hand it back to Christine to talk about the next draft alternative.
Thank you, Matt. Now on to alternative 5, which we are calling the Park and Transit Hub. This combined alternative will utilize decking to create a park and transit hub in the center of Newton Corner while enhancing connectivity for all users. This alternative includes many of the same elements that you've seen in the previous alternatives, including a new commuter rail station, the expanded ramps to and from I-90 West, a new center-to-center bridge, as well as a new element of decking over I-90. I'll walk through some of the elements here. So first is a relocated I-90 westbound on-ramp to be located where the current West Bridge meets Washington Street. Will be a reconstructed I-90 eastbound off-ramp to extend upstream. As I noted, an MBTA commuter rail station. A new center-to-center bridge connecting north to south with one-way southbound vehicular travel and two-way transit travel. Two-way travel will be provided on Washington Street north of I-90. Decking over I-90, including a park and pedestrian and bicycle connections. Extending that second lane on the I-90 westbound off-ramp by 500 feet. A reconstructed east bridge providing northbound vehicular travel. And finally, new pedestrian and bicycle connections via St. James Street. Looking at the vehicle circulation patterns, this alternative proposes to have one-way travel on the new bridges surrounding that new decking in a counterclockwise motion. Additionally, Washington Street north of I-90 will now accommodate two-way travel. St. James Street will be converted to one-way travel northbound to accommodate the new shared use path. Looking at a few key travel paths, drivers who are coming from the I-90 eastbound off-ramp and traveling to Center Street North will now travel around the south and east sides of that new park and decking area. For vehicles traveling from Center Street North to Center Street South, they will now use the new center-to-center bridge on the west side of the decking area. Reviewing the active transportation features, similar to Alternative 4, the bicycle accommodations will consist primarily of bidirectional bicycle lanes on local roadways through Newton Corner with a new shared use path on St. James connecting to the Charles River. Sidewalks will be provided along all roadways without shared use paths, and signalized crosswalks will be located in all quadrants of Newton Corner. And I will now hand it back over to Patrick to speak to the final draft alternative.
Thank you, Christine. So the final draft alternative we have to present and talk through today is Alternative 6, full access at West Newton. This alternative conceptualizes full interstate access with a new I-90 eastbound off-ramp and a new I-90 westbound on-ramp at West Newton. This alternative would be layered with the proposed improvements at Newton Corner in Alternative 5. The new eastbound off-ramp is proposed to tie into the existing traffic signal of Washington Street at Perkins Street, and the preliminary concept results in the off-ramp traveling behind the existing buildings on Sims Court. The new I-90 westbound on-ramp would utilize part of the existing off-ramp on the north side, which would be reduced from 2 lanes to 1 lane and would tie into Washington Street at the existing traffic signal with the westbound off-ramp. Looking at the vehicle circulation patterns in this alternative, the new ramps would provide full circulation to and from I-90 eastbound and westbound, full vehicle access in this area from I-90. No changes are proposed to the local roadways at present, and the changes at West Newton are limited to vehicle connections only, with no currently proposed changes to pedestrian or bicycle infrastructure, although crosswalk and signal upgrades would be made. When we presented this as a component at the last meetings, we did hear feedback it's not desirable. As a result of this feedback, the conceptual eastbound off-ramp has been revised to shift its alignment closer to the Mass Pike. It's important to note that this concept for full access in West Newton predates this study and was proposed during prior studies in this area, as well as MassDOT's road safety audit that was carried out at the Newton Corner interchange. As we move into alternatives analysis, part of that next step is in-depth traffic analysis to understand vehicle flow and use of potentially relocated ramps here in West Newton and some of those that are proposed to be relocated closer to Newton Corner. While it may not move past this study, alternatives analysis provides an opportunity for a more in-depth look at potential demand for these ramps than has previously been evaluated, and will allow a closer understanding of what that might or might not be. We acknowledge community feedback about this alternative and will continue to take it into account as the study progresses. Next, we'd like to touch on what our alternatives analysis process will look like. Evaluation criteria are a framework for our alternatives analysis process. They're qualitative and quantitative standards and metrics developed based on the goals and objectives for the study. Part of the overall study process is understanding and reporting what benefits and impacts can reasonably be expected from these alternatives. These metrics will help us compare the alternatives amongst each other and will present results from our upcoming analysis with you at a future meeting. The full list of evaluation criteria is available on the study website. Before opening up the floor to feedback, we'd like to give you an update on our overall schedule. There have been some changes to the overall study timeline. We had hoped to complete the study this winter, but alternatives development took longer than expected to ensure due diligence to community feedback. Right now, we're at the end of alternatives development, and following this meeting, we will transition to alternatives analysis. As we progress, we'll use your feedback to continue refining alternatives and analyze them using the evaluation criteria. This will include quantitative analysis, like anticipated impacts on transportation conditions and environmental data, as well as qualitatively looking at how the alternatives align with study goals. We hope to reconvene in several months, potentially over the summer, and currently aim to have a draft report ready in the fall, which would then be released for a public comment period, with the study wrapping up late this year or over the winter. At this point, we're going to transition to a discussion among working group members. As we start our conversation, I'd like to emphasize that your feedback is critical in this process. In part, this study came about due to your advocacy for changes at Newton Corner. This is a long-term planning study, and with us discussing transformational changes, we have to strike a balance between everyone's interests. Our conversations today, at past meetings, and at future meetings aim to shape a future vision for Newton Corner that takes community voices into account. At this point, we would like to open up the floor to discussion between working group members. For any members of the public in attendance, you'll have the opportunity to speak momentarily. For working group members, you can raise your virtual hand by clicking on the button at the bottom of your screen in order to be recognized. You can also submit written questions and comments in the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. As we're moving through our discussion, you can click the three dots at the edge of your video, and there should be an option to rename if you'd like to pop in your affiliation. You're also welcome to state that as we begin our comment period. A final reminder that this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on the study website with comments subject to disclosure for public record. So let me start by looking at the raised hand list. We have Ned from the City of Newton. Ned, you're welcome to unmute.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having this meeting, and thank you for the these thoughtful alternatives that you've developed. And I think the city staff will work with neighborhood residents and elected officials and we'll look forward to hearing from a range of different voices on these alternatives. I do think some of the most important things to keep in mind are ensuring that any of these alternatives, anything that's done, really enhances the Newton Corner Village. It is a long ago history, but one that is still felt every day of having the turnpike extension come through the Newton Corner Village, and the challenges that it continues to create for local access, in particular pedestrian, bicycle, safety and access for travelers of all abilities, and really ensuring that whatever is done is enhancing that, and also keeping in mind that the local access, the neighborhood circulation has on the local streets around Newton Corner has sort of evolved over many years, a delicate balance to enable vehicle access while managing local impacts of regional traffic, and any of these changes, moving any of the roadways, and in particular some of the highway ramps, um, keeping in mind the impacts that those would have upon local access and circulation. Um, some of them are probably not really going to be practical given the impacts that they might have on local access. Um, and um, the uh, uh, the proposal for the West Newton additional ramps. I think it's an open question of whether the additional traffic that would bring would be worth the improved access to the highway system. I do think that there are some very interesting ideas for improved connections, in particular multimodal connections, improved multimodal safety and access. Um, but um, we will follow up with more detail.
Thank you, Ned. I think you bring up a lot of good points there, and one thing that really stands out is how one of our study goals is reconnect neighborhoods. First and foremost, Newton Corner is a highway interchange that's in the middle of neighborhoods. The area is inherently community characteristic, but also with there being a highway interchange, that is a difficult balance that we have to try and figure out how to strike between the neighborhood as well as the regional traffic coming off there. We are bearing that in mind as we continue to alternatives analysis, and that goes for West Newton as well. Nate, I see a raised hand from you, and then after that, I know Robin was wanting to speak, so we'll go Nate and Robin, and then through the rest of the raised hands.
Thanks, Patrick. First of all, I want to say I loved getting at least some of the slides being available before this meeting, because that was very, very helpful. I thought there was an awful lot of information at this meeting that you just kind of are trying to absorb at this point. So I'm not sure what kind of meaningful feedback I can at least offer at this point. So will there be other opportunities for feedback, or is today the day that we have to respond to these? Because it's an awful lot. I'd love to watch this presentation like 3 times before I really fully absorb that. I mean, there's so much there that of course I love the commuter rail station. Of course I love the decking. I mean, but those you didn't need to do any of this, because we've said that before at other meetings. So what exactly kind of feedback are you looking for from us?
At the moment, we're just looking for initial reactions. These were posted online on Sunday, just a little bit in advance, so that you could have them if you had time to look at them, but no decisions are being made today. This is just initial reactions, time to walk everyone through these. Following this meeting, we'll be moving into alternatives analysis. We'll have another working group meeting, another public meeting, and then move into the public comment period. So there is still a good amount of time for continued back and forth dialogue on these alternatives, both as they stand right now and as they continue to unfold based on today's discussion and any additional time you might want to take after today's meeting to digest them. The recording will be posted online probably in a week or so. takes us a little bit of time just to confirm that transcript. So you'll be able to go back and watch that. The slides are currently lined up to get posted, so you'd be welcome to digest those as well. And in a few minutes, we'll put up a slide that has my contact information, and you'll be able to send over comments by email.
Thank you.
Thank you. Robin, I think you have been wanting to speak. I saw a couple of questions from you in the chat, but this is your
Thank you so
opportunity.
much. Well, this reflects a tremendous amount of work, and I thank you so much for keeping your focus on the goals that we decided on previously and presenting so many alternatives. My reaction actually is a series of questions because I think it's so difficult to consider this in the abstract. So many options, so many benefits that come from the different sets of options. For me, what really matters is trying to get a sense of what it means for the traffic flowing through, what it means in terms of the propensity for backlog. I'm sure the experts will probably be able to tell us which models seem more efficient for different purposes. It would be so helpful if we could have some kind of overlay of that when we're looking at the geometry that is presented to us, because I'm totally unable to make the extrapolation from geometry to process, or maybe you should say from structure to process. Particular questions that come to mind include which would be the fastest ways, for people to get off the pike going west and then north or south? How much time is it estimated to take in a typical traffic situation versus in a heavy traffic situation? For each of these models. So it would be very helpful to know what are we sacrificing. If we want to flow the traffic more quickly to the west, what are we giving up going to the east, if indeed there are trade-offs like that? Another concern is the potential cost. Are some of these much more expensive alternatives than others? And to what extent is this cost dependent? So when we look at the broader circulation issues, some involving the mass rail, some involving buses, how do each of these sectors respond to the structural changes, and how does that impact the cars? Are some of these changes going to reduce the number of cars coming through Newton Corner? And if so, which are the changes? Um, of course, we always have a concern about Church Street. And I'd just like to mention that we did ask for data last time when there were changes as to what the impact would be on Church Street. And we've been unable to gather that data. And there's this continuing discussion, is Church Street Newton, is Church Street DOT? But when we talk about moving the bridge that ends at Church Street, and we know that this is a very important intersection where children constantly cross to go to the YMCA, and where people park for all of the activities at the Y. Would you please, Patrick, have your consultants break out the impact of each of these alternatives to that critical intersection in Newton Corner, which is where Church Street crosses the Mass Pike, and what your plans are for that? So I guess thank you for letting me speak so long. My summary is really to ask you questions about how these proposed structural changes will manifest in the traffic flow, the pedestrian flow, the bicycle flow. Please give us as much time-related data as you can, car-related data, and impact on the surrounding streets. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. These are actually really timely questions because this is all what will be coming up next as part of alternatives analysis. Christine, I'm going to ask you to step in momentarily to give a bit more detail on that. But just to give a snapshot of where we are right now and going next, we put all of these together based on feedback that we've received on the components. And to have this meeting now present combined alternatives, that's really an opportunity somewhat early on before alternatives analysis to get initial reactions to, okay, how these look, at least on paper, understanding you do need supplemental additional information to take further decisions. To briefly hit on the Church Street side of things and data, I think that's something we'll keep in mind as we move forward into alternatives analysis and these alternatives continue to get refined. The data, I will have to touch base with the city and District 6 on that because that's been more of their side with the short-term improvements and that data. We do have that somewhere and there's a sketch level of it available on the study website. You're welcome to reach out to me separately about the more specific ask and I can try and connect you with the right people. Christine, would you like to briefly hit on the alternatives analysis side of things? That'll include some of the cost estimates as well.
Yes, absolutely. So following this meeting, we will be kicking off our alternatives analysis where we are going to analyze each of these 6 alternatives in depth. So we will be looking at everything you just brought up, Robin. We will certainly be looking at operations at all of the intersections within the study area and being able to compare them across alternatives as well as to, a no build condition. We will be looking at safety measures. We will be looking at access to transit. We will be looking at, travel times for all users, not just vehicles, but pedestrians and bicycles and transit users as well. And certainly one of the metrics we will be looking at is a high level cost analysis for each of these as well. So I think our alternatives analysis has been designed. It's been designed to address that evaluation criteria, where we have evaluation criteria tied to each of the goals and objectives laid out for the study.
Thank you, Christine. I'm going to run through a few written questions just to address them, and then we'll shift back to the verbal raised hands. We do have a few general questions, comments about the more recent changes that have been implemented in the past couple of years, notably at the eastbound off-ramp. MassDOT has seen a noticeable difference in the traffic flow at this location, including with some of the weaving and those movements getting split up. I know this is always a very congested area, and with that being a short-term effort, there's no immediate way to completely improve the traffic flow, but that has seen a noticeable improvement, and that continues to be something that our Highway District 6 office is monitoring. This is a hotspot location, as well as I know the City of Newton is keeping an eye on it as well. And there was in particular a question about whether or not that could be maintained long term. And Christine, I think as we move into alternatives analysis and following today's feedback, we can reconvene on whether or not that makes sense to put it in. We'll see how things unfold with the traffic model. There was also a question about the commuter rail station and whether or not new commuter parking would be created. As it's currently outlined in the alternatives, that's not envisioned, but I know that there is a lot of demand at the existing commuter rail stations for parking, and parking is always an issue just because we like to drive places in our cars. Parking is critical. That would be a conversation that needs to be had with the MBTA as we move forward. Currently, all of this is very sketch level, and as we continue to have those discussions, we would want to touch base with them. Going to hop back to the raised hands, and I'm just going off in the order that they popped up on our screen. So David from MAPC, you're next.
Thank you. I'm David Lautzenheiser with MAPC. This is my first meeting, so apologies if things have been said before. The first question is, why are we showing the North Beacon Street Bridge on the photo there? That's definitely an intersection that needs improvement, but probably for another day, another time. Specific to this project, I would just throw out alternative 1 right away, but I do want to focus on alternatives 2 and 4, and I think really the advantages or the goals of this project to reconnect what the turnpike, basically destroyed, which is the connectivity between neighborhoods on alternative 2 has a direct connection between Center Street and Center Street, whereas alternative 4 has a direct connection between Center Street and Park Street. And I think encouraging or going with removing the one-way couplets where possible and going with the two-way streets, I think is a really good direction to go. And particularly, so I think both alternatives 2 and 4 and their variants do that. So I would encourage that to be refined further as it were. I do think there's some benefits of the West Newton off ramps because that disperses traffic off the pike. That's something to think about further, but but by doing that, you take the load a little bit off of this particular intersection. So think about that. A couple other things. I biked from St. James Street to this intersection enough times to my heart race and go up on sidewalks and do all kinds of weird things to get around this. So I appreciate the bicycle and pedestrian connectivity throughout the project. I do think, sometimes going through the back streets south of Washington Street are better from the bike pedestrian perspective than running along Washington Street. But those are details for later. But I just want to focus on that the two-way reconnectivity between north and south be priority. The other piece I want to mention is the park and transit hub on alternative 5. As much as I like new parks, I think sitting at a park over freeway is probably not the most priority that I have, and the park just south of there is quite nice. I would actually look at that as an air rights development site. I think that would be much better, purpose for that area between Washington Street over the pike and looking at designs at least accommodate the footings for that. And no air rights takes 20 or 30 years to actually happen. So that's another topic, but at least providing in the design the ability to create the air rights development in that area would even further help reconnect the community. So I look forward to how this advances further. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Those were some very insightful initial reactions, and you hit on a lot of things that we're considering, especially on the side of reconnecting communities and north-south connectivity, not just for vehicles, but also for bicycles, pedestrians. To welcome to your first meeting, and welcome to anyone else whose first meeting this is. To hit on some context about this photo here, the North Beacon Street Soldiers Field Road intersection is in fact one of the offset focus areas of this study, in addition to the West Newton. Something we had discussed at a previous meeting was, as one of the alternatives components, was potentially building a new westbound off-ramp at North Beacon Street. That was screened out through the public feedback process, as well as our initial first level screening. So you no longer see that in these concepts as presented today, but this is part of our study area. Zeke, I saw you raise hand next.
Yeah, hello. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Zeke Mermel. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner for the City of Watertown. So we, as the City of Watertown, appreciate being here as a neighboring municipality. I want to thank Patrick and your team at MassDOT for all that you've done. Really appreciate you all inviting us as being on the working group. And of course, it's always great to be in the same virtual room with VHB and others here. And I want to thank any Watertown residents and colleagues who have joined today as well. I'm not going to take too much time since we are the neighboring city, but so I'll just be very quick in some high-level points. And we'll continue to be in coordination with other working group members like the City of Newton, the Watertown Transportation Management Association, and the MBTA, and defer to them all as appropriate. So I can certainly get more specific in future discussions. But back to, I was just going to mention some high-level takeaways. We just completed our final report for Watertown's city study to improve our city-supported mobility and within Watertown. So this study here is a great way to tie into that. We're thinking about the connection to and from Galen Street from the north, which becomes Center Street just north of the immediate area here. So I'm going to end with just a few, again, high-level takeaways. The first prism that we're thinking in terms of the City of Watertown is how can we improve transit connections for our commuters and our residents and our stakeholders up in Watertown, and of course, people from Newton coming to and from Watertown. So improving transit, especially the high frequency and express routes. So looking at the 5 alternatives, I was just kind of thinking, how each one eliminates circuitous flows. And then our second thing is consolidating ease of access for bus transfers, especially aligning the potential commuter rail station with the Galen Street corridor. I know that this is a design detail that will be gotten into in future iterations. Ped bike, I appreciate all your comments, David, from MAPC. It's great to kind of see all this new infrastructure as a way to make things less stressful for various users of the streets, like pedestrians and cyclists. And I'm happy to convey any lessons learned from projects like Watertown Square, for example, the park deck, and thinking about public space. And I certainly defer to the MBTA on, great tools like bus lanes and how that connects to and from Watertown Yard in our community into the study area. So just want to close by thanking everyone again. Thank you, MassDOT and Patrick, for having us today, and really happy to keep working with you all, with the city of Newton, and with others on next steps as you all see fit. So thank you.
Thank you, Zeke. One of the points I'll briefly hit on from your comments is transit access and efficiency for buses. That's why you see bus lanes included in some of these alternatives, like Alternative 5, Alternative 3. We would need to coordinate with the MBTA on exactly how some of those buses get rerouted through here. Some of them have doubling up with the circling of their movements, needing to go around the rotary twice. As envisioned, there might be some bus stop consolidation in here. One of the alternatives proposes a transit hub with those bus stops falling alongside the commuter rail station. With those bus lanes in there, it would be envisioned to have a more efficient route for the buses. But that would be fleshed out as these continue to advance alongside the MBTA, their bus operations team, and probably also as a result of some of the traffic modeling when we get there. I'll go through a couple of more raised hands, both of the city councilors that currently have hands raised. Then I'm going to do a few written questions, and then Serge will come back to you. Councilor Leary, I think I saw your hand first.
Yes, thank you very much, Patrick. On my two Ward 1 colleagues were unable to attend, so I'm here, and I will report back to them. I really feel like your team has really been listening to the concerns of the neighborhood, and you hit on a lot of important points that we're talking about. Improving the connectivity throughout Newton Corner, connecting the neighborhoods, more access for all users. I love the idea of the MBTA commuter rail stop. It would be so convenient. This is a dense enough neighborhood that I think that would support it. And we are working on, looks like our Newtonville commuter rail station will be accessible. So those improvements are coming along as well. And of course, it will be so great for our older residents and people that don't drive, and also just for the environment to have options, convenient options, both buses and the commuter rail. So I'd love to see that. The one thing that I haven't really heard much about yet is sort of looking at the sustainability goals for here. I mean, Newton Corner currently is a real heat island. There's a lot of pavement. So I would like to see also more ideas for public green space, where you would have more trees, less asphalt, that kind of thing. And it's with all the information that we received today, it's sort of hard for me to actually make a decision on which plan. There's so many good ones. It's nice to have those choices. So I look forward to your future meetings when you will come back. The one other thing I would say is sort of cost estimates and timeline, and I think Robin also brought this up. We don't want to wait another 50 years to see long-term improvements for Newton Corner. So I would put that into scale in terms of like paving over the highway is obviously very expensive. Is that going to be cost prohibitive or take so much time that none of us will be alive to see it? So I want to take that into consideration. But I do love the plans with keeping the commuter rail station, the connectivity, the pedestrian safety, the bike lanes, the shared lanes. Those are all really important to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councilor. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your comments. To hit on those cost estimates and timeline, those will continue to get fleshed out. I know that we've been talking about this area for a very long time. This study is part of an overall effort to move those efforts forward as much as we can. Ultimately, at the end of this study, we will outline a timeline and cost estimates, and then we would circle back internally at MassDOT overall to talk about what exactly project development in this area would look like. And as we continue to have these conversations, that's a key part of this process. So thank you. Councillor Maliki?
Thank you. So I'm the ward councilor for West Newton, and I've been trying to let people know about this process. I've gotten reactions from quite a number of people about the idea of the West Newton full access, and not one is favorable. They and I am very concerned about what the collateral impacts would be. You might think people would like to have an easier way to get onto the Mass Pike going west and getting off coming east. But the greater concern is what it would do to an already congested West Newton Square, which and our city people well know. You know, we've got Washington Street is the main thoroughfare east-west, and we've got streets coming in north-south, and it's haven't quite figured out yet how to manage all that volume in the competing directions. And just to take one person's questions, how many additional cars are expected to enter West Newton each day? What do projected backups at Washington Perkins and Washington Chestnut look like during peak hours? How does it affect the existing eastbound flow from Route 16 onto Washington Street, which is already backed up? What is the expected impact on nearby streets that Waltham and Cherry? Those are coming down from the north, and I would add, you know, Chestnut Street coming up from West Newton Hill, Highland Ave. Even there could be impacts as far out as you know, coming in from Watertown over Bridge Street to California Street. It's a very wide area that could be affected, and how would the you know, as the mapping applications tell people their best ways to go, that's going to affect volume. I would also note that on the Newton Corner side, alternatives 3, 4, and 5 still appear to be taking a big chunk of the YMCA parking lot, and this is a very important institution in Newton, and their parking lot is often full as it is. So I wonder if you have had discussions with the YMCA about this potential effect.
Thank you, Councillor. To start off on the very quick yes/no question, we have not yet had that discussion with the YMCA. Right-of-way impacts have not been evaluated in detail. That is something that's done as part of the project development process, and there's a very specific legal process for how those right-of-way impacts are evaluated, discussed. That is not part of this planning effort. On a related note, West Newton, thank you very much for bringing up West Newton. It was a big part of our conversations at our last working group meeting, at our last public meeting. We understand that this is not a desirable location for a new on and off ramp as in the community. And you ask a lot of good questions from whoever sent you those questions. And those are questions that we want to be able to provide answers to. In order to hit on those answers, how many additional cars are those anticipated to bring in, the projected amount, the impacts on that West Newton Square area, that alternative needs to be brought into alternatives analysis. Just because it's brought into alternatives analysis does not mean that it will end up as a recommended alternative at the end of the study. But in order to have full understood answers to those questions, it needs to be brought into alternatives analysis. So thank you for bringing up that area.
Thank you.
Thank Thank you. I'm going to run through a bunch of the written questions and answers, and then we'll go back to the raised hands in the order that they've come up. I appreciate everyone's patience. As we've established, this is a very important area in Newton, and we're glad to have so much interest in this project. It does not end outside of today's meeting. We might end up going a little bit long. This meeting is scheduled until 5:30, but we do want to get to as many people as we can. If we don't get into anybody, please feel free to send emails following the meeting or even letters. I love snail mail. Anyway, in the interest of time, there was a question from Representative Sangiolo about will there be additional traffic data collected for the alternatives analysis, or will you rely on data you've already collected? There's been a lot of traffic data collected over the years as part of the short midterm effort. We collected some when we kicked off this study in 2024. I know that's a few years ago now. Part of alternatives analysis, Matt or Christine, I'll ask you to jump in momentarily, will include projecting that data to a future year and analyzing the future year impacts of that traffic data. We have a really robust amount of traffic data that is going to get incorporated into the traffic model. Matt or Christine, do you want to jump in quickly on that?
Sure, I can jump in. So yes, there's been a lot of traffic, a wealth of traffic data collected over the years as part of the short-term improvements in the midterm planning study and now the long-term planning study. As part of our initial phases of this study, we reestablished an existing conditions, status quo kind of base plan of traffic volumes and patterns. And then what we did is we projected that out into the future to the year 2050, and that has established our baseline of future conditions. And then all of these alternatives analysis will be evaluated on that future conditions baseline. So we'll be able to compare what Newton Corner would look like if nothing were done from now into 25 years in the future, and then in each of the 6 alternatives.
Thank you, Christine. There have been a few questions about St. James Street and the overall impacts on traffic flow for some of these alternatives for traffic that's going to and from the river. These questions are correct in that some alternatives propose converting travel on St. James Street to one way. Depends on the direction in the alternative. But whichever direction you would not be able to go, I think primarily, let's see, just to confirm, would change it toward the river travel in alternative 4. In that event, if you're coming from Nanatam Road, you would either have to go down to the Watertown Square area and come up Galen Street, or take an alternative path through Brighton. That is a little bit contingent on whichever alternative it is.
Just to chime in there, Patrick, we also did a preliminary analysis looking at some OD from farther out, and we found that there's a fair amount of traffic using St. James Street that are coming from beyond the Newton Corner area, coming even from like Cambridge down Soldiers Field Drive to get to the interstate. So our preliminary analysis also thinks that some of that traffic will just avoid Newton Corner altogether and might get on I-90, say at the Alston-Brighton interchange. So we'll also dig into this a little bit deeper as we get into the alternatives analysis. But I just wanted to flag that.
Thank you, Matt. There's another written question that I'm going to hit on quickly, and then we'll go back to raise hands. I know we have a few of those. Lauren Clark asked, how much weight will LOS, for those of you who don't know this acronym, it stands for level of service, be given in the alternatives analysis compared to other metrics like pedestrian/bike travel times through the interchange? We won't be weighting any of the metrics more than others. Matt, I see you pop up here. Are you wanting to jump in?
Oh, yeah, I'll just chime in that. So, yeah, we have developed our study goals and objectives and evaluation criteria that I believe are on the study website. And will be taken into consideration. We will look at level of service, but that won't be our sole consideration. We definitely will be considering bicycle accommodations, bicycle connectivity, pedestrian connectivity, and a lot of our other goals and objectives as we kind of analyze all of our criteria. So it won't just be focused on traffic. We're kind of taking a holistic approach, looking at all of our objectives and the criteria tied to those objectives.
Thank you, Matt. Going back to raised hands, Surgeon, I think yours was first. Thank you, everyone, for your patience throughout this process. I know there's a lot to say, and we really appreciate everyone's detailed input.
Well, thank you, Patrick, and everyone else for working on this project over the years, and still some time to go. I'm joining the working group representing Bike Newton, just so you know, even though I've been part of these meetings before, but as a member of the public, but now as a member of the working group. And I just want to kind of go back and thank you for really seriously considering the study goals of the project. The improving safety and mobility and access for all, and that for all is so important. The transit, the bicycles, the pedestrians, um, and reconnecting Newton's neighborhoods and enhancing the quality of life. I mean, previous iterations of MassDOT personnel maybe didn't prioritize those things, and we had projects like this in the 1960s and also the Central Artery. And then really how important it is to promote sustainable transportation. That includes walking and bicycles and transit. And really thank you for working on this. And I just want to expand on some of the thoughts that David and Robin and Zeke and Ned and Allison and Julie and others have said. I'll just go through the options very quickly. So option one, I don't think is a favorable option. It's really maintaining the status quo. I mean, it does reestablish some bidirectional travel on Washington Street, but it doesn't do enough to reconnect the neighborhood. It doesn't do enough to establish these community connections that are so important to increasing the vitality of this neighborhood and stimulating potentially economic growth. And it maintains the circle. It maintains the rotatory nature of the interchange. And this is really unwelcome. I mean, many of us are here because we don't want the so-called circle of death to live another 50 years. And so option one is not really favorable. I'll get back to options two and three, which I do have very positive things to say about. But with option four, it just seems like there's too many turns. I have a feeling with these short intersections with traffic lights, as well timed as they may be, I think it would jam up with traffic. And then ultimately the problem is with the ramps. The extension of these ramps, I believe this option included a 1,200-foot, quarter of a mile extension of the eastbound ramp. And it's just going to bring more traffic into the community. And creating that eastbound ramp and making it into like two legs, if I remember correctly, the plan calls for really a major extension of this ramp system. And when I go back to the study goals, how does this help reconnect Newton's neighborhoods? How does this enhance the quality of life for people who live there? And I would really like to see alternatives, not just planned on the design, but also planned on different levels of traffic demand, because we have this whole concept of induced travel, but we also have traffic evaporation, which we're seeing on Washington Street since we reduced it to one lane between Newtonville and Newton and West Newton. And so option four is really, I think, undesirable. And then option five with the transit hub, once again, it creates a unidirectional rotatory flow around this so-called park. But as I think David pointed out, who wants to be in a park that's surrounded by one lane of travel going around in a circle over and over again? And then it also includes this reconstructed eastbound ramp extending upstream and basically bringing potentially even more and more traffic. Any of the options that block people from going southbound on St. James Street, I also think are undesirable, because for those of us who live on the south side of Newton, if you're on the Nantum Road, Sogersfield Road, you take St. James to cross over to get to Center Street and then go to Newton Center. And so then that would divert you either to go on the Turnpike, increasing traffic and congestion on the Turnpike, or into Watertown, almost literally into Watertown Square, and that's congested also. So I think the solutions that involve St. James, eliminating the southbound flow in St. James are basically bad solutions. And that brings us to options two and three, which I think really are the meat of the matter, and they're very similar as was pointed out during the discussion. The MBTA station is crucial. I mean, one day we'll have high frequency rail service between Riverside and South Station. we'll have the Grand Junction Railroad reestablished, allowing people to travel into Cambridge. And so this Newton Corner station, just think about the future. It's not just now. This is a key element of an overall transit and transportation plan that includes electric high frequency rail service that will enliven the whole Washington Street corridor, and enable new housing to be built and other things. Um, and I would try to merge together some of the elements of Alternative 2 and Alternative 3. They both include the bidirectional flow. They both include the Center Street Bridge. That is really the most crucial aspect. That Center Street Bridge is key to everything. And maintaining it bidirectionally. I think one of the options only shows the traffic going southbound on the bridge, but not northbound. Maintain that bidirectional flow on that bridge. But maybe with option 3, can we come up with a plan that doesn't extend the ramps, and that includes maintains the current ramps as option 2 does, but includes option 3 with the rail station that actually puts that at a major advantage. Anyway, just to wrap up, and just like everyone else has said, I don't think anybody wants the traffic to be dumped in West Newton. West Newton traffic patterns are really challenging as it is, and I think you're going to exclude that option anyway. But that option is I think going to go off the table. And then finally, actually no, that's it. That's all the options. So options 2 and 3, those are the ones. Find a way to merge them together, add a few bits and pieces that are good from the other options, and you'll come up with a plan that I think everybody loves. Thank you.
Thank you, Surgeon. I always appreciate your thoughts, and if you think of any more after this meeting, you'd be welcome to send them over, and that goes for everyone. Just to start off my response here by saying we're nearing the scheduled end of this meeting, 5:30, but we may go on and we'll try to get to everybody. Nikki, if you could just jump ahead to the contact information slide for anyone that needs to drop right off at 5:30. We're not going to end the meeting now, but if you do need to leave this meeting, feel free to jot this down and hop off. And like I said, this meeting will be recorded and posted on the website. We're going to take a couple more raised hands, and then I know there are a couple of members of the public who would like to speak as well. And we have a few comments and questions in the question and answer box from the public as well that I would like to get to. So the next raised hand that I saw was from Sandy from the MBTA.
Thank you, Patrick. Yeah, Sandy from MBTA Planning here. First of all, thank you, Patrick, and the project team for your really thorough work. This is really exciting to see this advancing. Thank you to folks for a really interesting and thoughtful conversation. I am looking forward to working with you guys to kind of flesh out some of the key transit relevant details as this moves forward, things like bus circulations and stops. We're very happy to see bus lanes included in some of the alternatives. This is a really high priority for us at the T with the 57, which is a frequent bus, and some of the Pike Express buses, other routes coming through this area. It's a big area for us. I do want to emphasize that much of the delay that buses encounter is on the approaches to the area, not just that bridge over the Pike. And so we'd like to take a look at priority there in addition to just that bridge right over the Pike. We'd be happy to share data to kind of highlight where transit priority measures would be most impactful and where we can think about the kind of the best allocation of road space to maximize throughput of people rather than necessarily just cars. Also looking forward to coordinating on safe pedestrian and bicycle access to transit in this area, which is something we've highlighted in past meetings. I know other people brought that up, and something that's been important for our staff in thinking about this area. And then I want to acknowledge the appearance of a train station idea in several of the alternatives. I have kind of one statement on that from the T and one question for the project team. So first, we hear that folks are excited about the prospect. At the T, we're very much in the analysis stage on this. We're glad the study is taking a feasibility kind of look at the station. We do need to make sure this makes sense in the context of the operations and the rider needs on the full Framingham-Worcester line. As you know, the distance between stops in Newton is already very close, and we need to make sure that if this were to eventually proceed, net rider benefits would exceed costs. I do want to mention it was announced at the February MBTA board meeting, and I'm going to put this in the chat, that we are working on a rail modernization plan. So that is an opportunity for folks to advocate. There will be public meetings coming up, and that will be looking at some of the kind of 5, 10, 15-year things we can do with the Framingham Worcester line and other lines in a realistic world where we're dealing with trade-offs. We'd also want to look at a station possibility multimodally. Newton Corner offers wonderful bus transfer opportunities, and we'd be looking at maybe down the line offering train service there in the context of all of those bus options, including the existence of the Pike Express buses. So that's where we are in that. I'm happy to continue to engage with folks. And one question for Patrick and the project team. I see you've got the station in kind of a consistent location in the different alternatives. Is that location because you've already done some feasibility analysis and that's where you've determined that the best place for a Newton Corner station would be, or is it just kind of representative of the general area where a station might be? Because I know one of the questions we've had is just like physically, where would a platform fit? Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Christine or Matt, I may ask you to speak to this more specifically because your transit team at VHB had looked at the current constraints and planning for MBTA commuter rail platforms. And Sandy, we've also had a lot of conversations about this because this has come up at every one of our meetings for this study. We know that the community is very interested in a commuter rail station at Newton Corner. And these are conversations and dialogue that we continue to have, and we're happy to explore the feasibility of, especially on the side of those multimodal connections. On the side of the conversations, I think we had hit on that's potentially the most logical place to put it based on where the transit hub might be located, as well as the constraints of the Pike, et cetera. But Matt or Christine, I'll allow you to speak to that more specifically. And then I would also note that, Sandy, we can talk about this separately and come back with a more detailed answer for the working group.
Yes, I can chime in. Our transit and rail team has coordinated with MBTA. We are also involved in the design of a number of other stations. So we had our team take a look at the footprint that would be required essentially for the envelope for minimum size envelope for the station here, and looked at a few different locations. And this was the location where it could best fit with the least amount of right-of-way impacts. There are obviously a lot of ramps here with the on and the off ramps and bridges, and a lot of physical barriers to work around. And this was determined as to the best place for most feasible.
And that can be something we continue to discuss.
Yes, absolutely. This is very preliminary. We are not into design yet. This is very conceptual.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you, Sandy. Michael, you have a raised hand, and then we're going to ship to some public comments. So thank you. Feel free to go ahead.
Thank you so much. And just repeating, thank you for the great work. I was thinking as we went along how you might help people understand and figure out for all of us which is the best plan. And we've talked so much about stitching Newton together. And I was just thinking about, as you run your analysis, what that really means. I would just throw this out as a suggestion, which is stitching together in Newton for a village in Newton means a place that people go to, not go through. And this is, of all the places in, anywhere near here, this is a go through place. And Newton Corner has suffered historically because of that. And what I think about, if we switch to the quantitative side of things, what that means is that if you traveled with almost any mode and you were going to a destination in Newton Corner or nearby, how would you pass through? What would be, it's not level of service, but what would be the delays? How many lights would you go through? If you were in a car and looking for parking, if you were going place to place by bicycle or walking, what would be the cost? Delay, difficult crossing, stressful for you to do your loop and then go back home. And so I think that sort of for me, it's a mental way of thinking. If people could do more of that, make these local trips and accomplish that with sort of by a convenience or a lack of pain, however they're traveling, we will have accomplished something if we could execute that. And so I think that was my framing. I did want to say that while I do understand that the connection from Nonantum Road into here is a very important one, the connection to the river is truly critical as well. And it's going to be a balancing between those, but this is so close to the river, but by any means other than driving, it seems extremely far. And I think closing that gap is a huge quality of life improvement for people anywhere in this area. And finally, as a West Newton resident, I will just echo that this, I completely agree that this should been brought forward to be understood. Um, that is the one place where the concern about induced demand is so high. We would really not want to make the mistake of constructing a mini second circle of death in the process of doing this. And so I appreciate that you're sensitive to it, and you're also sensitive. This was raised multiple times in public meetings to look at this. And so I appreciate you brought it forward, but I appreciate that you're also looking at it with open eyes. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Those were a lot of very helpful, detailed points as well. And um, I will once again emphasize that we appreciate the feedback on West Newton. That is something we continue to carry forward to have an in-depth understanding of it. But we also hear the community voices on the side of that, especially on the induced demand side. And there was a related point to that that I wanted to touch on from Surgeon's comment about long-term planning versus short-term planning, proactive versus reactive. This is a long-term planning study that's meant to be a proactive future transformational look at this area and the local neighborhoods that are integrated in the fabric. At this point, I do think that actually is a logical transition point to the public comment period. Nikki, if you could pull up that procedural slide, I think people have a general working knowledge of how this works, but just to hit on some points. For any members of the public who would like to speak or offer comment today, now is your opportunity. You can click the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen or hit *9 on your phone if you're calling in. You can also put questions and answers in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen by clicking on Q&A. And at this point, we will transition to the public comment period. If there's anyone who has to hop off this meeting, that is okay. It's recorded. It will continue to be recorded and posted online in the next week or two. The slides will also be available. And once again, this is not the final opportunity for engagement during this study. So at this point, thank you for your patience, everybody. I know we've had some time for raised hands. I see Andy Gluck. You're welcome to unmute and speak.
Thank you, Patrick. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you all, working group and MassDOT and everybody else involved with this project. It's amazing. We've been waiting a very long time to dig into this mess that we all call the circle of hell. My name is Andy Gluck. I live in Newton Corner. I have for 36 years. I'm also a committed pedestrian and biker and public transit user through this area. So I too really, really love the comments made. I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember his name, but he's your working group member who's from Bike Newton. That alternatives 2 and 3 are wonderful, and some sort of conglomeration of those two, I think, is the best direction to head in. I just have 3 very specific, detailed issues that I think I'll bring to your attention. Number 1 being, I love the connectivity, pedestrian and bicycle wise, all the way down to the Charles River. I would just encourage you to add to that piece of the puzzle, crossing Charles Bank Road. It's treacherous. It's really hard to get safely across, even if you get safely across Newton Corner down to the river. We need better access, pedestrians and bicyclists, to get across safely to the bicycle lane on the southbound side of the river itself. So that's number 1. Number 2, some anecdotal evidence here. As much as I love the idea of the future of rail travel and high-speed electric rail travel and having a stop in Newton Corner, my feedback after, again, commuting and living here for so long is that not a lot of people would make the effort to use the commuter rail as it exists today. So I'm just bringing that up as a point maybe the MBTA folks can take a harder look at. And last but not least, related to that, if we're going to make public transportation, in particular bus travel, which is a great hub for bus travel, the 57, the express buses on the Pike, as everybody has mentioned, is that we need much better bus waiting areas because people are standing out in the cold in the winter, they're getting wet on a rainy day. And if we're going to make public transportation be used more, a really nice bus, either hub or two better bus waiting areas on either side, I think is really important to this whole puzzle. So again, just three really specific things. And I thank you so much for getting this process rolling. And I too, like my counselor Allison, hope to see this happen before I leave the earth. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. I do as well. We appreciate your engagement. We appreciate everyone's engagement. And I think the entire study team also appreciates that are these themes that continue to come out about connectivity, neighborhoods, bicycle and pedestrian connections. And we are really striving to make sure that those are reflected in the alternatives as we progress. At this point, I'm going to transition to some written questions and comments. I don't see any other raised hands at this point, but if anyone would like to speak to those, you can pop in. I see a question in the question and answer chat from Russell Beckler. What is the current plan to mitigate current congestion? The new traffic plan is better, but is bottlenecking at Center Street and blocking off ramp traffic. So MassDOT has done a few short-term improvements with the introduction of the traffic signal, the barrier at Newton Corner. We continue to evaluate the effects of that on traffic and congestion. And if needed, we will discuss potential changes that can be made. At this time, this study is a long-term planning effort that looks toward more long-term solutions at Newton Corner. Dennis asks, have you considered air rights development at Newton Corner and West Newton on MassDOT land, which will provide potential housing and 2 new MBTA railroad stations? Dennis Rice, AIA, Developmental Resources, Inc. And he also wanted to note, I studied both Newton Corner and West Newton for air rights development and shared with MassDOT and Newton Planning. Dennis, you're welcome to send over any supplemental comments by email. I do appreciate you bringing this up. This is not something that's being evaluated as part of the study. We're coming at it through more of a transportation focus. But you do call out some existing air rights in the area, and we have had some inquiries about that. So thank you for bringing that up. Robert, I'm going to say Physic, it might be Physic. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Had a couple of questions. One of them being, as a MassDOT-led effort, the focus on traffic and roadways is understandable, but where is the vision that truly manifests a reconnection of the community across the wide gash that the Pike made? Thank you for asking that question. To a degree, it's rhetorical, but I can answer it in regards that these alternatives aim to do that within the lens of a transportation focus. You see that reflected in the park decking alternative that we have, and that is something that we can continue to evaluate as we move forward. The Mass Pike built through this area did fundamentally change the neighborhoods that are in this area that are still neighborhoods. And you had a follow-up question. Understanding and comparing alternatives is very hard to do on screen. Would the design team be able to provide a physical exhibit of the presentation for public display, perhaps at City Hall or the public library? Even a set of drawings and documents at a table would be very useful and allow more and better informed feedback. Thank you for asking that, Robert. I think that is a discussion that we'll have to have among the study team, and that is also something that we would have to ask the City of Newton if it's possible to do, but we will consider that, and we can see what the outcome of that is. So thank you. Dennis had an additional comment. I agree with Serge. Alt 2 and Alt 3 combined are the best alternatives, and Alt 6 westbound ramp access only should be developed further. I think he indicates, I also support the rotary scheme first proposed in CTBS study from 2008, modified to utilize the Church Street Bridge. If I didn't get that quite right, Dennis, feel free to clarify that. An anonymous attendee commented, I'd like to reiterate on the need to find a new way to get pedestrians and bikes to and from the Charles River while maintaining traffic connections in both directions. Thank you for reiterating that. That is an opportunity for me to say, like, we are going to take all of the feedback from this meeting, reconvene as a study team, use that to refine alternatives during alternatives analysis. These may get tweaked a little bit based on feedback today, and then we'll circle back at our next meeting and present our alternatives analysis results with you all. At this time, that is all of the written questions that I have in the question and answer box. Nikki, if you could please progress to the how to reach us slide, thank you. And we'll give people another moment if they want to put anything written in the question and answer box, anything clarifying, click any raised hands. We are a bit over time, it's 5:41. Our study website is listed here. This meeting recording will be posted on it in the coming weeks alongside the slides. The alternatives that you saw today are already posted on there. I understand it was difficult to see the level of detail on the slides here today. That is the unfortunate reality of presenting these in a PowerPoint, but if you open them on the study website, you'll be able to zoom in with your computer, look at key different features, and you're welcome to send over any clarifying questions or comments you have on those about the overall study to my email address on the screen, patrick.l.snyder@dot.state.ma.us. Our website is also listed here. We have a QR code following this meeting. If that website is a little bit too long or you don't like QR codes, you're welcome to just Google Newton Corner long-term planning study. It should pop up. And at this point, I think we can move toward closing this meeting unless anyone has any final comments. Nikki, could you just exit from the PowerPoint for a moment so we can all see each other? I know some people are on video, not everyone is, but I did want to just take this opportunity to emphasize thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your patience as this process continues. We are going to move into alternatives analysis shortly. We will take your feedback into consideration. Please feel free to stay in communication with us as this proceeds, and we will keep you updated on the scheduling of our next meeting in this continued process. Thank you very much. Have a nice evening, everyone.